The sun had barely risen over the quiet neighborhood of Westwood Heights, yet the day had already begun to carry a heavy tension. The streets looked peaceful on the outside, fresh-cut lawns, neat sidewalks, and children's bicycles resting beside porches. But behind the fences and windows, something else was unfolding. Something silent. Something uncomfortable. Marcus Reed walked down Maple Drive with steady steps, hands tucked calmly in his jacket pockets. He was a tall man, with a composed posture and sharp, observant eyes. Marcus carried a reputation around the town. People described him as the kind of man who never raised his voice, even when the world tried to break him. A man who believed in dignity, patience, and doing the right thing, even when others did not. But lately, the neighborhood association, especially one particular member, had been testing that patience. Her name was Evelyn Hartman, a woman known for her strict rules, sharp voice, and a habit of treating the community like her personal kingdom. She believed everything should be under her command, where cars could park, how lawns should be cut, even how people should speak. And Marcus had become her new target, all because of a simple garden project Marcus was doing with the children from the local community center. They were planting small flowers outside the walkway of Marcus's home. A small, harmless, beautiful act. Something meant to give the neighborhood color and warmth. But Evelyn claimed it was a violation. Not regulation approved, she had said. Not in line with community standards. To her, nothing was ever acceptable unless it was her idea. As Marcus approached his house, he noticed her standing in front of his gate again. This time, she wasn't alone. 2 other members of the homeowners board stood behind her, holding clipboards and papers, like they were preparing for a trial. Marcus paused for a long moment before walking closer. Evelyn's eyes narrowed sharply. There he is, Marcus Reed. We need to discuss your recent violation. Marcus exhaled slowly. He did not want conflict, but when conflict arrived, he never ran from it. What seems to be the issue today? He asked, voice even and respectful. She held up a printed notice as if it were a courtroom verdict. You are ordered to remove the unauthorized garden decorations immediately. You were told the front yard must remain in uniform format with the community layout. You chose to ignore that. Marcus gave a calm nod. The flowers are for the children from the community center. They planted them. It teaches responsibility, joy, and connection. There is no harm in that. Evelyn scoffed loudly, crossing her arms. You are not listening. This neighborhood is not a place for experiments. Rules exist for a reason. Behind her, one of the board members shifted uncomfortably. Maybe we can let the flowers stay, he mumbled quietly. But Evelyn shot him strong glare that he immediately fell silent. Marcus stood tall, speaking clearly. I understand rules, but sometimes rules need heart. These flowers bring life to the street. They harm no one. Evelyn's voice sharpened further. You have until tomorrow to remove them, she snapped. If you do not, there will be penalties, and I will make sure they are strict. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The quiet suburban street suddenly felt very small. Marcus's neighbors watched from their windows. Some sympathetic, some curious. No one brave enough to step forward. Marcus spoke with controlled firmness. I will not remove something that brings good to this community. If you want them gone, you will have to remove them yourself. Evelyn's lips tightened. Her pride had been challenged, and pride was something she valued more than fairness. Without another word, she turned sharply, signaling the others to follow. This is not over, she said, voice trembling with anger. They walked away. Marcus let out a slow breath. Conflict exhausted him, not because he feared it, but because he knew how quickly small tensions could turn into something much larger. He closed his gate and entered his yard. A small child ran up to him. 8-year-old Ava, one of the children who helped plant the flowers. "Mr. Marcus, are the flowers okay?" she asked with big, worried eyes. Marcus leaned down, smiling softly. "Yes, they're okay. We are going to take care of them. Together." Ava smiled again, relieved. She didn't understand the politics. She just saw something beautiful and wanted it to stay. And Marcus. Marcus saw the beginning of a battle that would test patience, dignity, and strength. Because people like Evelyn did not walk away. They came back. And when they came back harder. But Marcus Reed had never run from storms. And he would not begin now. The next morning arrived quietly, but the tension in the air felt different, heavier, sharper. Marcus woke early, as he always did. He brewed coffee, stepped outside onto his porch, and let the morning breeze settle against his skin. The flowers the children planted glowed gently in the sunrise. Little bursts of color. Innocent. Peaceful. He knew Evelyn would not let yesterday go. But Marcus was not afraid of conversation. He only hoped the situation could be handled with respect. As he watered the flowers, neighborhood children began walking to school. Some waved shyly. Ava rode her small bicycle down the street, smiling brightly when she saw him. "Morning, Mr. Marcus," she called. "Morning, Ava. Ride safely." He watched her go, with a soft smile. The simple things mattered most. That was what Evelyn didn't understand. By mid-morning, Marcus's doorbell rang. He opened it to find Detective Samuel Hayes, a familiar face from the local police department. Hayes was a man Marcus respected, a quiet, fair officer who didn't believe in unnecessary conflict. He had visited the community center several times, helping teach self-defense classes to teenagers. Hayes nodded respectfully. "Marcus, morning." "Detective Hayes, what brings you here?" Hayes cleared his throat. "There was a formal complaint filed this morning. I was requested to visit in person." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess, Evelyn." Hayes exhaled. "Yes. She claims you are refusing neighborhood compliance orders and causing a potential public disturbance. She also suggested the situation may escalate." Marcus remained calm. "I have caused no disturbance. I am simply refusing to remove flowers planted by children." Hayes nodded. He already knew. He'd heard the neighborhood talk. "I believe you," he said quietly, "but procedure requires that I follow up. I need you to confirm your side for the record." Marcus gestured toward the small garden. "There it is. A few flowers. That is all. No fences, no barriers, no hazards, no property damage." Hayes inspected the area for a moment. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Marcus, listen. I know this is unnecessary, but Evelyn has influence on the board. She is pushing hard." Marcus looked directly at him. "I will not be intimidated into removing something harmless. These flowers bring happiness. If rules are being used without compassion, then the rules are being misused." Paragraph. Hayes respected the answer. "If anything changes, call me directly. I don't want this turning into something bigger than it needs to be." "I appreciate that," Marcus replied. As Hayes walked away, Marcus noticed something that tightened his chest. Across the street, several neighbors stood outside, watching quietly. Some whispered. Some avoided eye contact. Some stared directly, waiting, almost hungry for conflict. People didn't choose sides loudly. They chose silently. And people then chose silently. Later that afternoon, Marcus went to the community center. Kids gathered in the open field behind it, laughing and practicing passing drills with a worn-out soccer ball. Their laughter was a reminder of everything worth protecting. Ava waved him over excitedly. "Mr. Marcus, look what we made." She handed him a folded piece of construction paper. A drawing of flowers, smiling suns, and stick figures holding hands. At the bottom, in big uneven letters. But this time, it was different. They weren't just discussing. They were planning. Gesture heavy, stern expressions, pointed glances toward Marcus. Evelyn's voice was sharp, even from a distance. She was rallying support. Marcus knew what this meant. The situation was no longer about flowers. It was about control, authority, and pride. He finished helping with the soccer activity and walked Ava home. Her mother leaned in close and spoke softly. "Thank you for standing up for the children. We support you. Many of us do. But we're afraid to say it." Marcus nodded knowingly. Fear did strange things to a community. When Marcus returned home, evening was settling in. The streetlights flickered on, cicadas buzzed, the air hung thick with summer warmth. And Evelyn stood waiting at the gate, but this time she wasn't alone. 5 homeowner board members stood beside her. Clipboards, cameras, phone recording. Prepared, not for discussion, but confrontation. Marcus stepped forward calmly. Evelyn spoke first, voice cold and pointed. "Marcus Reed, you were given notice. You have chosen to ignore it. This neighborhood is built on order. If you refuse to comply, then you will face consequences." Marcus's voice remained steady. "I have not damaged property. I have not caused disruption. I have not harmed anyone. The flowers will stay. They bring this neighborhood joy." One board member, a nervous man with glasses, whispered, "Maybe we should try another approach." But Evelyn silenced him instantly. "No. I will not allow disorder in this community." "That's it." Marcus looked at her with quiet strength. "That is not leadership. That is control." A few neighborhoods had stepped outside now, watching, listening. Evelyn's face tightened with frustration, sharp enough to cut. "You have until tomorrow morning," she snapped. "If those flowers are not gone, I will escalate this to full legal and enforcement action. And, I assure you, I will win." Marcus did not react with anger. He simply spoke with gravity. "We will see." Evelyn turned and walked away with her group, a storm of pride and certainty in every step. Neighbors whispered louder now. Divided lines forming, the air electric. Marcus stood still, calm, strong, stillness like a stone in a river. Because he understood something Evelyn did not. A person can command rules, but respect must be earned. And the battle for respect had only just begun. The next day arrived with a different kind of silence. Not peaceful, not soft, but tight, stretched, and waiting. Even the birds seemed quieter. The sunlight felt sharper. The neighborhood was no longer just a neighborhood. It was a battlefield of unspoken sides. Marcus stepped onto his porch slowly. He didn't rush. He didn't panic. The flowers looked just as they had the day before. Bright, alive, full of color and innocence. He knew Evelyn expected them to be gone. He also knew that he would not move them. He sipped his coffee and watched the street. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, a group of neighbors began to gather on the sidewalk. Not loudly, not aggressively. They simply stood, watching. Marcus recognized them. Families who had always waved politely before. People who had once asked him for gardening tips and grilled together at block parties. Now, they watched from a distance, as if waiting to see what side the wind would blow. Not long after, Evelyn arrived. Right on time. Her heels clicked sharply on the pavement. Each step, loud, in the morning stillness. She did not come alone. 2 security officers walked behind her. Not police. Not enforcement. But people who looked like authority. That was the point. She stopped at the edge of Marcus's lawn, chin lifted, voice steady. You were given time. The flowers are still here. Marcus stood calmly, hands at his sides. They are not harming anyone. Evelyn's expression tightened, but she didn't raise her voice. This is not about flowers. It is about compliance. A neighborhood cannot function if people decide which rules apply to them. Marcus nodded slowly. Rules without compassion become punishment. And this, he gestured to the small garden, is not worth punishment. Evelyn took a slow breath, clearly fighting the urge to react emotionally. You have until sunset, she said finally. After that, action will be taken. She turned and walked away. The 2 officers followed. The neighbors watching began to drift back to their homes, but there were whispers now, murmurs, divided thoughts, quiet judgments. Marcus remained still for a long moment. Then he went inside and sat at his kitchen table, hands folded. The fight was no longer about Evelyn. It was about everyone else. Later that afternoon, Marcus decided to take a walk to the community center. He needed space to think, and movement always helped him think clearly. Children were inside, drawing and laughing. Teachers prepared snacks. The atmosphere was warm, untouched by the tension outside. But when Marcus walked inside, several adults stopped talking mid-sentence. They weren't hostile, just uncertain. A woman named Denise approached him. She looked tired, like she had been wrestling with her conscience. Marcus, she said softly, we all know those flowers aren't hurting anything. But Evelyn, she's saying if you don't follow the rules, other people might stop too. And then the neighborhood will fall apart. Marcus listened patiently. Denise, he said slowly, a neighborhood doesn't fall apart because someone planted flowers. It falls apart when people stop caring about each other. When rules become more important than kindness. Denise looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded, slowly, like she was finally letting herself agree with something she already believed. You're right, she whispered. We're just scared. Marcus placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Fear should not decide who we become. And she understood. When Marcus walked home, the sun was lower in the sky. The day was ending. The air felt heavy. Sunset approached along with the ultimatum. As he stepped onto his porch, he noticed something he hadn't expected. A group of neighbors, 6, 7, maybe more, walked toward his home. Not angry, not aggressive, just walking. Among them was Ava's mother, and Denise, and the father who always fixed his motorcycle in the driveway, and the elderly couple who always walked their small dog every morning. They gathered near the flowers. Ava's mother spoke first. These flowers make kids smile. They make people stop and breathe. They do no harm. We are tired of being afraid to say what we know is right. Another neighbor stepped forward, his voice firm. We may not want to fight, but we won't stand silent while something good is taken away. Someone else added quietly, we just want peace. And peace doesn't come from forcing people to follow blindly. Marcus looked at them, really looked, and felt something warm rise in his chest. They were choosing, not loudly, not dramatically, but clearly. Evelyn appeared moments later. She froze when she saw the group. This is not a protest, she said, sharply. This is a violation of. No, Ava's mother interrupted, calmly, but with strength. This is our neighborhood. We have a voice too. Evelyn stared at her, stunned. This was not how she expected things to go. The officer beside her shifted uncomfortably. Even he could feel the shift. Marcus stepped forward, not to argue, not to attack, but to speak with steady truth. We are not here to break rules. We are here to remind each other that rules exist for people, not the other way around. Silence. Deep, heavy, honest. Then a voice from behind Evelyn spoke unexpectedly. It was the nervous board member from earlier, the one she had silenced. I think, he said quietly, we need to review the garden regulation. Maybe we were too strict. Maybe there should be exceptions for community projects, especially ones for children. Evelyn's eyes widened, disbelief flickering across her expression. The neighborhood watched. A decision was being made. Not by force. Not by fear, but by understanding. Marcus didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He simply breathed. Because this wasn't the end of the story. But it was the moment things changed. The first moment when the community saw clearly. Power is loud, but respect is stronger. The next warning came with an overcast sky. Not storming, not raining, just muted, as if the world itself was waiting for the next decision. Marcus stood by his window, watching the neighborhood slowly wake. People were different now. Not loud, not rebellious, but thoughtful. Something had shifted inside them yesterday. Something real. He stepped outside and inhaled deeply. The flowers were still there, glowing with color, even under gray light. They felt hopeful, not defiant. He knew today mattered. There would be a board meeting, the one Evelyn tried to avoid. And this time, the neighborhood would not watch silently. Marcus walked to the community building slowly, hands in his pockets. The air carried quiet tension. A few neighbors walked behind him, not talking, just being present. Their presence alone spoke louder than words. When he arrived, the meeting room was already half full. Not just board members, not just officials, families, parents, teens, even elders who rarely left their homes. The room was alive, not with conflict, but with expectation. Evelyn sat at the front table, posture stiff, fingers interlocked so tightly her knuckles were pale. Two board members sat beside her, one calm, one uncertain. The nervous board member from the day before nodded at Marcus, a small, cautious sign of respect. Marcus took a seat in the front row. Silence settled. Evelyn spoke first, voice formal and carefully controlled. We are here to discuss the matter of unauthorized garden development at Residence 14B and determine appropriate enforcement. Her tone was cold, like she wanted to skip straight to punishment. But the nervous board member cleared his throat and added, we are also here to discuss whether the garden rule itself is too restrictive and whether exceptions are necessary. That sentence changed the room. People leaned forward. Evelyn's jaw tightened. Before she could respond, another neighbor, the father who fixed motorcycles, raised his hand briefly and stood. It was a boy who had decades of peace. He simply spoke like someone who had waited long enough. We know the rules. We follow them. But rules are supposed to protect the peace of the neighborhood, not crush it. Marcus planted flowers to help kids feel welcome. My daughter plays there every afternoon. She hasn't smiled like that in months. His voice held weight, not just opinion, but experience. Other parents nodded softly. Ava's mother stood next. Our children feel safe in that garden. They stop and breathe. Some of them were feeling isolated and anxious before. That little patch of color gave them comfort. Please do not take that away because of paperwork." The room murmured in agreement. Then a voice spoke from the back, shaky but meaningful. It was Mrs. Delaney, the elderly woman with the tiny dog. "I have lived in many places. Rules have their place, but kindness is what makes a neighborhood home. Those flowers remind me of my late husband's garden. They make me feel less alone. I believe they are a gift." Her hands trembled, her voice did not. The room felt fuller now, warmer. Everyone had seen what Evelyn had not. Those flowers were not plants. They were connection. Evelyn stood slowly, trying to regain the room. "This is not personal sentiment. This is structure. A neighborhood cannot run on feelings and exceptions." But Marcus rose then, not to argue, but to explain. He spoke calmly, with steady confidence, his voice filling the room naturally. "I understand rules. I respect rules. I have lived a life where discipline was necessary. But I also learned that rules lose meaning when they forget the people they are meant to support. This garden does not threaten anyone. It brings peace. It teaches children to care for something living." He paused. The room listened closely. "When I served overseas, the world felt harsh. The things I saw could have hardened me forever. But flowers saved me. Small patches of color in the middle of destruction reminded me there was still beauty in the world. That life continues. That hope survives." Silence settled like a blanket, soft and full. Many people had not known he was a veteran. But now they understood something deeper. The garden was not decoration. It was memory. It was healing. Marcus continued, "I planted those flowers to help the children here feel safe, to help the lonely feel seen, to remind everyone that life is still beautiful, even when it feels heavy." His words did not demand approval. They simply told the truth. The nervous board member took a breath and spoke aloud. "I motion to revise the garden rule, to allow community flower beds and decorative personal gardens, if they receive neighbor support and cause no harm." The room filled with quiet agreement, nods, murmurs, a rising sense of unity. But Evelyn was not ready to surrender. Her voice came sharp, cracking slightly. "This is chaos. If we allow this, people will start building fences, statues, structures everywhere. Property value will drop. Order will collapse." Her fear was clear now. Not power, but fear of losing control. Marcus looked at her, not with anger, but with something like understanding. "Evelyn," he said softly, "this is not about losing control. It's about letting the community breathe. You do not have to carry everything alone." For a moment, her expression faltered, a flicker of something real. Exhaustion, perhaps, but she did not respond. The vote was called. Hands rose, one row at a time. Not loudly, not dramatically, just steadily, confidently. Majority in favor. The rule changed. Marcus did not smile. He simply exhaled, deeply, quietly. The breath of someone who had carried something heavy for a long time and finally set it down. The flowers would stay. The children would keep their safe space. The community would heal. But this was not only a victory for Marcus. This was a victory for everyone who learned that kindness is not weakness. That quiet courage changes everything. That peace is not passive. It is chosen. The meeting ended, but no one rushed to leave. People lingered in small groups, speaking quietly, absorbing the shift that had just taken place. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was gentle, like a door that had finally been opened after being stuck for years. Marcus stepped outside into the cool afternoon air. The clouds had begun to break, letting soft sunlight fall over the homes around him. It looked almost symbolic. A neighborhood breathing again. Children were already gathered near the garden, unsure if everything was truly settled. When they saw Marcus, they ran to him, faces bright with relief. "Is the garden staying?" one of the little boys asked, clutching a small plastic watering can. "Yes," Marcus said simply. "It's staying." A cheer rose, full of joy and innocence. Ava ran forward and hugged him tightly around the waist. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Her smile told the whole story. The parents standing nearby watched the children play among the flowers. Some smiled. Some wiped their eyes. The moment was quiet but meaningful. This was what they were protecting. Not plants. Not property rights. Community. Later, as the day settled into evening, Marcus sat on his porch. His dog, Scout, rested at his feet, Kale thumping occasionally against the wooden boards. The sky had shifted into soft orange and lavender tones. The neighborhood was calm, but different. Less guarded, more connected. Marcus noticed small signs. Neighbors waved more openly. People walked slower, actually looking at one another. There was warmth now, not just routine. It was subtle, but it mattered. Marcus leaned back gently and let himself rest. He hadn't realized how exhausted he was until this moment. Not physically, but emotionally. Carrying peace is a quiet, heavy task, one that requires patience and steady purpose. Scout lifted his head and nudged Marcus's hand, as if sensing the release of weight. "I know, boy," Marcus murmured. "We did good." Question. Across the street, Evelyn watched from her window. Her hands were pressed against the glass, her posture stiff, but not with anger, with something else, something she was not used to feeling. Uncertainty. For years, she had believed that order kept the neighborhood safe, that strict rules prevented decline. That firmness was strength. But today had shown her something else. Neighbors had stood together, not in rebellion, but in unity. They had spoken from sincerity, not defiance. She saw Marcus sitting quietly with his dog, not gloating, not triumphant, just present, steady, grounded. Something in her chest tightened. She had been trying to control everything because she had been afraid of losing everything. And fear, once it takes root, can grow stronger than reason. Her daughter, Lily, stepped into the living room behind her. "Mom?" she asked softly. Evelyn didn't turn. She just said, "Yes?" "You were really hard on them," Lily whispered. "On him. And the garden. The kids love it. I love it too." Evelyn's breath caught. Her daughter. The one person she thought she had been protecting through control was telling her that her approach had caused harm. Evelyn closed her eyes. She did not cry. She did not break. But something shifted. Marcus arrived at the garden early, tending to the soil, trimming leaves, adjusting moisture. His movements were calm and practiced, almost like meditation. He felt peace here, not just in the plants, but in the act of caring for something fragile and alive. He didn't hear footsteps until Evelyn was close. He looked up slowly, not defensive, simply aware. She stood there with her arms at her sides, no clipboard, no posture meant to intimidate, no anger, just a woman, tired, thoughtful, searching for the right words. For a moment, neither spoke. Then, Evelyn inhaled, steady but hesitant. "I came to say, I was wrong. The words didn't come out sharp or forced. They came out human. Marcus didn't respond immediately. He waited, listening. Evelyn continued, her voice quieter now. When I took the position as HOA president, I thought keeping everything controlled would keep everything safe. My life has always been structure, rules, expectations. I thought enforcing order would protect this neighborhood from falling apart. She looked at the flowers, bright, living, gentle. But somehow, I lost sight of what makes a neighborhood feel alive. Her eyes softened. I didn't see the good you were doing, or the peace this garden brought. I didn't see the community. I only saw the rules. Marcus stood, wiping dirt from his hands calmly. You cared, he said. You just forgot that caring isn't always controlling. Evelyn nodded, the truth settling deep. Yes, she said. I did. She hesitated, then added, I want to help now, if you'll let me. The offer wasn't for redemption. It was for growth. Marcus considered her, not with suspicion, but with quiet understanding. Help is always welcome, he said. Evelyn exhaled, something unspoken releasing from her shoulders. Together, they knelt beside the flowers. Not as rivals, not as authority and subject, but as neighbors. Later that day, the garden was more alive than ever. Families gathered, children laughed. People brought seeds, new plants, colorful stones, and decorative signs. Even teens who usually stayed inside came by to help. The garden had become something more now. Not just a space of beauty, but a space of belonging. It had become a symbol that growth is possible, in soil and in people, that conflict can become connection, that kindness, once offered, can spread. And the neighborhood, once rigid and quiet, had begun to bloom again. Marcus watched from the side, not as the center of attention, but as part of the whole, exactly as he intended. Scout sat beside him, tail wagging slowly. The world was simple and full, and peace, real peace, did not need to be loud. It simply needed to grow. Days passed gently, but the change in the neighborhood continued to grow, steady and noticeable. The garden had become the center of everything now, not because it was large or extravagant, but because it felt like something shared. Each morning, different neighbors stopped by to water plants, straighten pathways, or simply enjoy a moment of quiet before their day began. Marcus often arrived early, but now he was not alone. Sometimes it was Mrs. Alvarez, carrying a small basket of fresh mint leaves from her backyard. Sometimes it was young kids who had taken it upon themselves to create a small pebble border along the walkway. Sometimes it was just someone who needed to sit for a while and breathe. There was peace here. Not perfection, but peace. And that peace had taken root. One afternoon, a light breeze moved through the neighborhood, carrying the scent of flowers and warm earth. The sky was bright, and birds called lazily from the rooftops. It felt like a day that belonged to summer, even though the calendar insisted it was early spring. A group of children were playing near the garden when a moving truck pulled into a nearby driveway. The kids stopped and stared, curious. A woman stepped out of the truck first, petite, with short curls and soft, cautious eyes. Behind her came a younger boy, maybe 8 years old, holding a backpack the way someone holds something important. Some neighbors watched from porches and sidewalks. Not judging, just wondering. The boy looked nervous, his eyes searching the unfamiliar houses. Marcus saw him and walked over without hesitation. His presence was calm, steady, carrying no rush or force. He simply approached, like someone used to offering welcome rather than imposing it. He knelt slightly, making his voice level with the boy's. Hi, he said gently. "Welcome. Want to see the garden?" The boy blinked, surprised but curious, and after a moment, he nodded. His mother exhaled softly, relief moving through her like a quiet wave. She was not ignored, not dismissed. Her child was seen, and she knew that meant everything. The boy walked slowly along the path, while Marcus showed him how the plants grew, how each seed took time to settle before it sprouted. The boy listened closely, absorbing every word as if the garden were something magical. His mother watched from the sidewalk, her posture relaxing little by little. Meanwhile, Evelyn stood across the street. She had seen the truck too, and something inside her recognized the moment. A new beginning was happening, and this time she wanted to be part of it the right way. She crossed the street, not with authority, but with intention. When she reached the mother, she greeted her quietly. "My name is Evelyn," she said. "Welcome. If you need anything, and I mean anything, please ask." There was no clipboard, no list of rules, no tension, just a simple offering of kindness. The mother smiled, a real one. "Thank you," she replied. And something healed right there. Not loudly, not dramatically, just honestly. As the afternoon went on, more neighbors came outside. Some brought iced tea. Some brought folding chairs. Some brought stories. Soon the sidewalks were full of people, talking, laughing, existing together the way neighborhoods are meant to. One on this, the garden became the center once again, a place to gather, not just look at. One on this, Marcus stood off to the side for a moment, watching it all unfold. He didn't need attention or recognition. Just seeing people connect was enough. Evelyn joined him, hands resting loosely in front of her. She looked at the crowd, her expression quiet. Pause. "I never expected all of this to happen," she said softly. Marcus glanced at her, his voice warm. "Change often starts small," he said. "Just one seed." Evelyn nodded slowly. "I'm learning." There was no judgment in her tone, no guilt, just truth. She was growing too, and growth takes time. Later that week, the HOA board gathered again. This time, the atmosphere was different. The long table no longer felt like a place of enforcement. It felt like a place of planning, of collaboration. Instead of focusing on restriction, the board discussed how to support community events, shared spaces, and communication. Suggestions were met with openness instead of opposition. The shift was real. It had taken time, but it was happening. Evelyn stepped down as president, not in defeat, but in recognition that leadership needed to change with the community. She nominated someone else, someone patient, someone trusted. And no one felt bitterness. Because this time, choice was shared, not forced. As days continued, the neighborhood found its rhythm. The garden flourished. The children grew bolder. The old tensions faded, like shadows in late afternoon sun. Even Scout seemed happier, his tail always wagging, as if he sensed the balance returning to the world around him. One evening, Marcus walked the boy from the moving truck home, after they had spent time watering flowers together. The boy held a tiny sprout in a small pot, his first plant, and he treated it like something priceless. At the doorstep, his mother smiled softly. "He's been happier since we arrived," she said. "More open, more comfortable." Marcus nodded. "He has a place here," he replied. She swallowed gently, emotion touching her voice. "So do we," she said, and Marcus smiled. Not wide, not showy, just warm. "Good," he said. That's how it should be. That night the air was cool and calm. The sky was scattered with stars, and a quiet hush lay over the houses and lawns. Lights flickered softly behind curtains. Life moved slowly, peacefully. Marcus sat in the garden. Under the lanterns someone had strung between posts. They cast warm rings of light that swayed gently in the breeze. The flowers around him glowed softly in the darkness. He placed his hand on the soil, not to tend it, not to adjust anything, just to be present. This garden had started as something he wanted alone, but now it belonged to everyone. It had become a symbol, not of ownership, but of unity, growth, healing. And as he sat there, listening to the quiet, Marcus felt something deep and steady settle inside him. Not triumph, not relief, just peace. A peace that had been earned, gently, patiently, together. The next weekend arrived with clear skies and warm sunlight. It felt like the whole neighborhood had quietly agreed that today was a day to gather. Not because of a meeting, not because of a problem, but because something new had taken root and people wanted to nurture it. The garden was in full bloom. Flowers of every shade leaned toward the sun, and the small stone pathway wound like a gentle ribbon through the beds. You could hear laughter, low conversation, and the occasional excited shout from children playing tag nearby. A long wooden table had been placed near the garden. It wasn't fancy, just something someone had once stored in a garage and finally decided to use. Now it was covered with simple food: salads, fruit, bread, lemonade. Nothing extravagant, just shared. People arrived slowly, in pairs and groups. Those who once only waved now came forward and settled side by side. Neighbors who barely acknowledged each other months ago now shared stories as though they had always known how to speak to one another. The shift was unmistakable. The neighborhood was whole. At the far side of the lawn, Evelyn stood next to Marcus. The same two people who had once stood on opposite sides of frustration and misunderstanding now stood shoulder to shoulder in silence, observing the life around them. Evelyn took a breath and spoke in a quiet tone. "I didn't realize how much control I was trying to hold on to," she said. "I thought order came from rules, but order came from connection." Marcus nodded. He didn't need to say much. His presence had always spoken more than any argument could. "You learned," he said simply. She looked around at the children, the laughter, the shared plates of food, the open doors. "Yes," she replied, "and I am still learning." There was no embarrassment in her voice, only honesty. Marcus offered a small smile, steady, warm. That's all anyone can do. The boy who had moved into the neighborhood last week approached the garden carrying his little sprout pot. He walked right up to Marcus, proud, eager, glowing with ownership. "Can I plant it now?" he asked. Marcus knelt to see the plant closely. It was small, 2 leaves, a tiny stem, but healthy. Delicate, but strong. "Yes," Marcus said. "Let's plant it together." They chose a place near the center. Marcus pressed his hands into the soil with the boy, helping him lower the plant gently. The earth closed around it softly. The boy stepped back and looked at his mother, who was nearby. Her eyes were full, the kind of fullness that comes from gratitude that cannot be put into words. Evelyn watched as well. Her expression softened. Something in her heart opened just a little more. It was a simple moment, but it meant everything. As the day went on, the gathering became something of a celebration, not one that required announcements, decorations, or speeches. Just the quiet joy of community regrowing itself. Someone brought out a speaker and played soft music. People clapped along. Children danced and ran through sprinklers. Neighbors, who had once kept distance from each other, now stood close. Even Scout happily trotted through the yard, tail moving like it had its own language. The sunlight shifted slowly down toward evening, turning the atmosphere golden. Shadows stretched, soft and long, across the lawns. Marcus sat on a garden bench as the celebration continued around him. He didn't need to be the center of the moment. He simply watched, content. The garden that had once been a point of conflict had become the heart of the neighborhood. Not because of its beauty, but because of what it represented. Patience, understanding, healing, shared space, shared life. It had given people a reason to step outside of themselves and see each other fully. It had reminded everyone that community is something you build, not something you enforce. When the sun finally began to set, the lanterns hanging on lines around the garden flickered on, one by one, casting soft circles of warm light. The scene looked almost like something from a painting. Gentle light, laughter, food, and peace. Marcus exhaled slowly, closing his eyes for a brief second. He didn't need recognition. He didn't need praise. He didn't need people to thank him. He only needed this, the sound of people connecting, the feeling of something broken slowly mending, the quiet strength of knowing he had stayed steady in the storm. And because of that, the storm had passed. Thank you for watching this story. If you enjoyed it and you want more stories like this, stories of courage, change, and standing for what is right, make sure you stay connected to the channel. Remember to like the video, share it with someone who might need it today, and if you haven't already, subscribe so you never miss the next story. Your support helps these stories reach more people and keeps this community growing. Thank you for being here. See you in the next video.